Hey, what's up, B fam? Today we are talking on a topic that we hear so many of you reach out and you're so frustrated, not because of the things necessarily going inside your home, but all those things that take place outside of your home too, and the things that the exes, the drama that they bring into your household. And so the topic that we're talking about is parenting and co-parenting. And if you're in a step family, that means not only you and your dear husband or your dear wife are helping make the decisions to raise your children. You have maybe one, two, possibly three other people, if not more, speaking into the lives of your children and how you parent them. And being a regular biological family where mom and dad are raising the kids together already comes with its own set of issues because you come from your own backgrounds growing up and you have different parenting styles. And now you're compiling that in with a whole new set of people. And a lot of times, the others that you got divorced for a reason, right? You couldn't get along, you couldn't agree on certain things. And now you're having to make decisions on what's best for your children and try to get along for their sake. So we're continuing with our book study. We're using the Blended and Redeemed book by Scott and Vanessa from Blended Kingdom Family, and we've been working our way through the chapters. So we are now on chapter 7, and it's the co-parenting chapter. So if you haven't got the book yet, get online, get it ordered, and then go back if you haven't been doing this with us and go back and start from the very beginning because every week has been powerful stuff just piling on top of each other. Every single chapter I have thought, I wish I would have had this 15 years ago. Some cases, I wish I would have had it when I was 18 and pregnant and getting married for the first time and had absolutely zero idea what I was doing, which also led to becoming a blended family because it led to my divorce. And I have been so blessed to have Ginger from the family core and Heidi from Marriage Emotion 365 over talking through these different topics with me. So it's not just me. We're having this whole collaborative book study kind of thing. We're reading it on our own and then coming together and having some just really great discussions on what that looked like for us. And so we are going to get more into that in just a minute. We'll be right back.
When we first became a step family, just like you, we didn't quite know what we were getting into.
Scarlett and Randall Tandy here from Enjoying Your Blended Family, and we have been a blended family for over 15 years. And not only did we have to figure out how to handle the day-to-day struggles that come with being in a step family, about 7 years in, our biggest fear happened and each of our kids went to go live with their other parent.
We went through seasons of zero connection with each one of our kids, and we had to get really creative on ways to reestablish and reconnect those relationships.
And through prayer and becoming very intentional, God restored our family in true God-like fashion and made it better than we could have ever imagined or hoped for.
So God has called us to help other families do the same thing, to make those connections. So if you're looking for stronger relationships, deeper connections, and more communication, then we believe it truly starts with being intentional and creating these fun opportunities in our family.
Click the link so that you can get quick access to the process that we use to help you find common interests in your family so that you can be more intentional on spending time with your kids, your spouse, and your family as a whole.
We believe you can take the step out of step family and create a blended family that you truly enjoy.
You can find our podcast on Enjoying Your Blended Family on YouTube or anywhere that you listen to podcasts. And while you're sitting there, go ahead and follow us on social media.
So when you have more fun, you'll see less problems.
All right, guys. So we are back and we are ready to get into it. And I know if you have questions by the end of this, those questions hopefully will be answered. If you feel like you have zero control in your step family, hopefully by the end of this, our prayer is that you have an understanding of the things that you can control and how you can better cope in your co-parenting situations. And so we're just going to jump right into it today. And I want to get just a little bit of background from both Heidi and Ginger on what would you consider your family dynamics in your co-parenting? Were you were you doing a good job and y'all were co-parenting with each other? Was it that y'all had to parallel parent, or maybe you had a parent that wasn't even involved, so that wasn't even an issue? So we'll go ahead, and Heidi, we'll start with you.
Sure. So I had my ex-husband was part of the blend for us. So he was involved and I had to co-parent with him and he was active and that was a constant co-parenting. And Kenny, he had adult children by the time we got together. So there was no more parenting that we had to deal with in that. But I think one of our biggest struggles was just me allowing Kenny to help me parent when the boys were in our house. Because I think we talked about a few weeks ago, those inner vows and having that kind of mama bear protection over our natural kids. So I wanted somebody to co-parent with me when they were there, but then I got really protective. So I think we're going to go into that in a little bit as we talk. But yeah, so the boys were with us part of the time, and I had to share and co-parent with their biological father. And then Kenny was also obviously in the home with us, so he helped to parent in the house.
Okay, nice. How about y'all, Ginger?
In our world, we up to the point that James and I started our blend, I had parallel co-parented with our oldest son's father, and who had eventually had a stepmother. And then, of course, James and I were married. So we parallel parented alongside them, not too much conflict. Like the opening of this chapter says, no matter how different the two families are, you will always have one thing in common, which is the child. So although our homes were extremely different, I never truly questioned what went on at the other house, and he never truly questioned what went on in our house. So it was a dynamic that was probably helpful because we had an extremely litigious co-parenting situation on the other side. So with my daughters, James and I dug in right from the start, knowing it was going to be healthy for our children, for them to be with us and reside with us. It just took us 8 years to get there, and a lot of custody transition in between. So co-parenting with a very difficult individual on the other side, there was a lot of grace and mercy that needed to be had because her parenting style was different than what I was used to. So we, at our home, I was always more the disciplinarian until I needed him to step in. And to be honest, the kids were very good because we set those expectations right up front. So parenting or co-parenting wasn't difficult because the kids knew in advance what the expectations of our home were. And they knew that at the other house, it was totally different. So when my girls would transition back to the other home, it was somewhat more of a free-for-all. And they quickly learned that type of household was unstable for them, and they knew where the structure was. So there was very minimal co-parenting because we couldn't come to common ground on not one thing. And so, the co-parenting could be quite difficult. And then you have your struggles with parallel parenting as well. So James and I, in hindsight, recognize that God giving us the ability to see all of the dynamics was very important.
Yeah, I would say that ours was probably very similar to yours, Ginger, where it was a sticky situation. And when we come on the podcast and we're talking about our family situations, we always try to be cautious, right, on the way we talk about the other side of the family, because there are, two sides of the story, but there are also our kids that are that common factor. And we don't want to ever, although I am completely transparent about my life and the decisions that I made and the places that I messed up, not everybody is on board in that same place or has come to terms with those things. And so it's like, sometimes I feel like when we talk about topics like parenting, co-parenting, we feel like we have to a little bit tiptoe around things. And because I just want to be like, blah, and just say things like I want to say them, then I feel like I'm being dishonest. So know that when I'm going into it, if I sound like I'm trying to be careful in the way I say things, it's because I'm trying to be careful in the way that I say things. But I will admit, when it came to our parenting, first off, Randall and I both had full custody of all of our children. And
Okay.
that was from the get-go. And so they were 3. The youngest was 3, and then 7 and 8 when we married. And my stepdaughter's mom lived in another state. And so that wasn't, even though we had full custody and she could possibly have every other weekend because she lived in another state and we didn't have the ability, she didn't have the means to like fly her back and forth, and we didn't either. So it was more like holidays and like long weeks or extended time in the summer was more of the time where she got to see her mom. And then for my kids, it just depended on whatever was going on in their dad's life. And then a lot of it had to do with if I felt like they were safe there or not. And so when I read chapters like this, where it talks about co-parenting and getting on the same page and working together and just right in the beginning, right off the bat, it's talking about, communication is key. That's like the number one thing. And to have these like weekly chats. But like Ginger was saying earlier, there was no way me and my ex-husband could have got on the phone, or even Randall and his ex-wife got on the phone and had a healthy weekly chat with the other person, because I will say there was no way that could have happened back then. Randall and I have both grown a whole lot and learned a whole lot since then. So we may not have been triggered by so many things back then, a lot of the little things, whereas to now we may have been able to make better decisions. But back then, we were doing good to not have to meet at the police station for exchange days, because that became a norm for us. For my kids, it was a norm for them to have to meet at the women's place where they had supervised visitations with their dad for a time period. And then that went away and they had no visitation. And then, he would be doing really good and they would be able to spend every other weekend with him again. So it was just this constant, like, we never knew what season of life we were going to be in and how much the other parents were going to be involved in that. And I would say that there was also, I'll just throw myself under the bus with this one. There was a point when we first married that I wanted the other parents to disappear, to be completely honest with you. I thought this would be much easier if Randall and I were raising these 3 children on our own, and we could have a nice nuclear family, Christian home, teaching them our Christian values and nobody else speaking into their lives. I've learned over time that no matter what I want, the kids will always desire to be loved and accepted by that other parent. Even if they come to a point in their life when they realize that's not going to happen, they wish that it would have happened. They wish it could have been a different way. And so we're going to get into some of these different rules and these like best case scenarios, or if you could make this happen kind of thing. But just know, as you heard Heidi and you heard Ginger and you heard myself, we understand that the blended family dynamic is so unique and different in all situations that even if you wanted to have matching team jerseys and show up and cheer for your kid at their sporting event and be able to take family vacations with everybody, even if you wanted that, sometimes it just isn't possible, because it truly does take the other person be willing and accepting to be a participant in your co-parenting. And I will say I never had even heard of parallel parenting until after we started learning more about blended families and helping. And I started to learn terminology that when you're parenting, so just in case you don't know, when you're parenting in your household and you're letting them parent the way that they feel best in their household, that's your parallel parenting. At least that's my understanding of parallel parenting. And you have to learn at some point, you cannot control the other person's household. And where that gets sticky is when you feel like your children are unsafe in an environment, what to do there. And that's where a lot of, I think, the court battles and everything, and a whole lot of prayer and trusting God. So as far as we're going to go into communication rules to go by, and rule number 1 being parents should never communicate through the child. That's basically putting them in the middle and saying, oh, you need to tell your dad this or tell your mom this whenever you get there. And there happened to be the mediator between the two of y'all. We'll start with, I think we started with Heidi last time, right? Or
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ginger, we'll start with you when it
Right.
comes to using the children.
Right, as communicators. So I'm sure that Heidi sees this a lot probably in her practice, but relying on the children, it's just like the telephone game, right? Relying on the children to actually relay what you intended and how it comes out. And the terminology, the verbiage, the context that it's in, the tone that you use, all the child truly hears is your dislike for the other parent, but they perceive it as your dislike for them. And so when they hear the negativity by explaining to your child, I can't even talk to the other person that created you, and the irritation that comes through as the child hearing it as you're just irritated with me, you're irritated with the other person that created me, you're not happy with the way things are being done, and you want me to relay that. And so all you're doing is adding that pressure and stress onto that child, when truly it's your responsibility as a parent to make sure that that gets communicated well and precise, without inflection and without putting your child in a position where they perceive the dislike on themselves. And I know, I'm sure, 100% sure that I'm on the wrong side. I've been on the wrong side of this. I've been co-parenting for 26 years. I'm sure I've been on the wrong side of it, but I think that we quickly learned that relayed messages shouldn't go through the child. And so I was actually probably got better at it as my daughters came into my life, because all you're saying is, I dislike that other person who you are half of.
Yeah.
And that's all the children hear. So it's very important that you do not use your children to communicate either way, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. Even if it's a permission slip, whatever it is your responsibility as a parent to find a way that you can directly communicate, however that is, with the other parent. And so we had such a difficult time. We went through that for 8 years, and then we eventually didn't have to do that, because the girls became official 100% residents in our home, and that didn't happen, where we had to communicate. And when our son became an official resident 100% of the time in our home, he was old enough that the communication, you're grown up enough that it's fine, that there isn't a need to go back and forth about, school permission slips or anything like that.
Yeah. And that is the good thing that y'all have created as well with the Family Core app, is it has that ability to be able to chat in there as the adults back and forth. So if you need to say something, and then it's documented, and we'll talk a little bit more about some of that as well. So just know that there are tools that have been created to help these things. And we have one of those that created the tool right here on this podcast with us. So Heidi, would you say the same thing? Did y'all deal with this with your kids as well?
I think it's pretty natural for every blended family to deal with it in some way, shape, or form. I think it's kind of on a spectrum. You have the mild, the moderate, or extreme cases. And depending on the issue, I think sometimes we had mild cases of it where it's just like, hey, I need you to give this to your dad. It was a letter that accidentally came in the mail, or, moderate stuff. And then sometimes there was extreme issues, like, I'm trying to be careful, like you, Scarlett, the ex would say something to my children about his perception of what might have happened or not have happened in our relationship. And I have the best response for that. What I always told my boys was, I would love to talk to you about that, but I will talk to you only about it in the presence of your father, so that there would not be he said, she said. And usually the boys would then go back and tell their father, and that would be the end of it, because he knew what he was saying was not necessarily the whole truth. And so that kind of put a kibosh on that. But I think one of the things I really want to get across to the listeners, Scarlett, is The people that we see in our office are usually maybe years down the road is that they had to deal with adult issues that are never intended for children and their little brains to deal with. And so what we're doing is we're asking a 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 12-year-old to mentally be able to do something they were not designed to do. We are making them little adults before they really need to be. And so we have to really watch that we're not treating our children like a surrogate spouse or a friend. They're our children, and we need to keep them as young as they are as possible. And when we ask them to do these adult things, they don't have the tools. They don't have, it's like, telling your child, oh, we're short on funds this month. I can't pay the PG&E bill. Well, a child will think, I want to help, but they don't have the way to help. So they start to carry that burden on their own shoulders. So I just really want people to hear me. If you've been doing this, it's not too late to change, and you can apologize to your children and say, you know what, we're going to do something different now. We're going to not do this anymore. This is no longer your responsibility. I apologize for doing that. And there's no shame and blame if you were doing that. Just know that it's really between you and your ex-spouse and not the children at all.
What a great perspective to hear you say that, because I think that's also like, just as a parent, our fear deep down is that, the things that we're doing is going to cause our kids to be sitting on that therapist's couch and having these hard discussions over the things that we did wrong. And we're going to get some things wrong. And like you said, not to shame anyone that's in this position, but to recognize it and say, okay, I need to stop. Because, and I think we've said this several times as we've been going through this book, the things that trigger us and the things that upset us are things from our childhood. And so for what you're seeing, Heidi, is these issues, if it was blended family or if it was just even from their biological parents, putting pressure on them that was never intended for a child to have to deal with. And that's the part that gets hard, though, as well as, like, as I'm sharing earlier, like, you want to do what's right. I don't want my kids to have therapy. I don't want them to have to go to counseling. Or at least I didn't. I will say that I did not want them to need counseling and therapy because they went through such traumatic events from their childhood. So one of those inner vows that I had that we talked about a couple chapters ago is that I was going to protect them and keep them safe from anything that was going to do them harm. And in doing so, I was basically putting a bubble around them and not letting anybody else make any decisions, when it came to them. And my way was the right way. And if their dad did something that I disagreed with, I made sure that he knew that. And I would tell the children that that's not okay, or you should not be doing that. My kids know the word inappropriate. And they've been saying the word inappropriate since they were children, because I would tell them that show is inappropriate for you. You should not be watching. That music is inappropriate. So then now they say, like, well, the show's kind of inappropriate, blah, 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 when they're telling stories. And so it's hard when you're trying to preserve their little child mind and keep them safe, but you have other people speaking into their lives that's not their number one concern. And frankly, there's different people have different values and morals. And one of the things, when I married the first time I go around, and it was unequally yoked. And so my ex-spouse was not a believer. And so when I found Christ while he was serving overseas, and then I wanted to raise my children like that, well, he didn't know that side of me. He didn't know that was even going to be something that I, necessarily wanted to portray onto our children. And so now he's raising the kids accordingly in his household, and I'm trying to raise them this way. And if you don't have God as your lineman of truth, there's a whole lot of things that you'll allow to come in and out of your kid's life, but they truly don't believe that that's wrong. And so that's what makes it so complicated when it comes to this parenting. And I say all that, and what I was going to is I was trying to avoid my kids to be in therapy, but now I realize therapy is just a good, healthy thing, and we could all use some therapy, some coaching, some counseling, something just to be the best version of ourselves. So although I tried to protect them from that, now I see that it's just so beneficial to have an outsider talking you through some of these things that you may have a different perspective, or like very laser focused perspective, and not see the bigger picture there.
Right. That's what Heidi and Kenny are for.
Yay.
To continue to walk you through it, and to have such a unique niche in their practice. They're blended. They've seen some of the issues. They've had the age gap. They've had the co-parenting roles. They've had, they have the experience that can walk you through those laser focused issues. And it's so important. You're right. You always, the stigma around, not asking for help or not focusing on something with your marriage. I don't think that God intended it that way, because he wrote a book, an entire book for us to follow so we can get guidance. And there's godly people in the world that want to help guide you too. So you're right. I think we try and protect our children away from that, like it's something bad, but it's always nice to have a third party speaking into them that has value and truth for them, to where you're not speaking into your children all the negativity that you have for your ex-spouse.
Yeah, that's so good. And if at any point when you're listening today and you're like, yeah, but I can't even get on the same the same page with my spouse that I love and I live with now, much less the co-parent, hit up Heidi. Like, she would love to help you.
Yeah.
They would love to walk you. Her and Kenny would love to walk you through this and help discuss these things. They have programs for you. They have things called intensives where they come and they meet with you, and y'all just rip the Band-Aid off and get all of that stuff out and talk through. They don't just leave you sitting there bleeding, but they help, dress your wound all up, patch you up, and send you on your way with some tools to use. So if at any point you're listening today and you're like, oh man, this is, I need some, not a 1 hour podcast, I need something intense, that they have that. There is an option for you there as well. So when it comes to communicating with your spouse, what would it says in the book what regular communication would look like. And it recommends, if you can, an hour each week that you can at least touch base with and say, hey, this is going on. What would, this happened this week, or this is going on next week. Have either one of you done this successfully?
I'm laughing.
Yeah, I know. While Heidi's laughing. I did it successfully for a very short period of time. When the dynamics changed on my side or his side, it quickly becomes unacceptable. His spouse doesn't want that type of high level communication. When you can look at a child and know that they're doing well, it's very difficult to justify 1 hour. When your spouse probably doesn't get 1 hour of, specific conversation to cover one topic, even in your own marriage or under the same roof, that type of thing. So I think it's important, like we had talked about before, setting the expectations. If you are co-parenting and you're co-parenting well, those expectations should translate to the other home. 1 hour would be a big block of time. And it's also a big block of time that takes away from what's under your roof in a blended situation. Now, I know that that's probably from a very good scenario. Heidi, maybe you see it that way too, maybe in a very good scenario. But again, as the children start to age, what you're pouring into that child should still be represented at the other house. And it can probably lessen in times or lessen in touches, because the child is actually following the guidelines, following the boundaries. He or she is portraying that in the way that they live in their daily lives. So I think an hour might be excessive, to the extent of, like you said earlier, Scarlett, we're all pressed for time. Yes, your children are important, don't get me wrong. But again, and I'm saying, hear my heart on this one. The relationship that you have with your ex-spouse that you are raising children with is a business agreement. and you have to see it as a business agreement. You have to maintain it as a business agreement. You have to maintain the contract that's been put in place either by the courts or what you guys have agreed on. But for the benefit long-term of the child and everybody involved, you need to follow that agreement. You need to treat it as an agreement, and you need to respect that agreement on both sides.
And I may have misspoke by saying an hour. I think once a week is actually what it suggests,
Okay.
but not necessarily a time frame in there, but at least like touching base. I
Yep.
think
Oh,
what I filled in the blank is because every once in a while we would have some I would have actually conversation with Randall's ex-wife, and the conversation
yes.
would go on for an hour or so. I think that's where
Yes.
I was feeling it. But that was very seldom. And I think it was healthy looking back when we were able to have those conversations and see the human side of the other
Yes.
person, especially when they live in another state and you don't ever get to have those kind of conversations. So being able to touch base in and like see it like a business, like you were talking about. How about you, Heidi?
So what we did is, thank God there were cell phones by the time all of this happened in our lives. So we had a good enough relationship that we could really just text a lot and call. And I don't know if I've mentioned this before, but my ex-husband was a fireman, so he had a really crazy schedule. And so our month to month looked very different. It was never the same, days that we shared kids. But for us, we would have longer meetings in person, usually at his house because the children and he stayed in the house that we had together. We thought that was important that they had one house that felt like it was really theirs. So he kept that house. And so there would be situational meetings, like if one of the boys was getting in trouble or having trouble in school, or it was before a vacation or a new school year, or there was a health or medical condition that needed to be discussed. We would then meet in person for longer periods of time and discuss, okay, what does your next 6 months look like for schedule? Where do you want to take the boys? What about vacations this year? Because we had a court order in place, but it was so flexible because we didn't go through a typical divorce. We did a mediation and just filed our own paperwork. We were blessed that way. And, our relationship now is amazing. Our oldest son is getting married and having a wedding, and we're help planning that together. So it's really grown over the years. And I'm not going to say it wasn't hard at first, because especially for my ex-husband, I was in the process of divorcing when got together with Kenny. So my ex still had really hard feelings towards Kenny at the front because he didn't necessarily want the divorce at first. And so that was really hard, for all of us involved. And now we're all friends, so there is hope out there that the relationship can change. But it's just, I guess the bottom line is, and my ex is not a believer, so for me it was just really trying to shine the light of Christ to him in the way I spoke to him. And it was not easy, you guys, and I failed a lot of times. So there was a lot of times I got irritated and said things I probably should not have said to my ex-husband, and there was things I took on that I shouldn't have taken on. But we just, over time, it's been 18 years now, it's a whole different ball of wax. And so there is hope out there, you guys, that it can get better. And I just pray for everybody listening that eventually it can be that for you.
Yeah, I think it is, if your mindset is to possibly get to that point, is a good thing. And again, I'm not sure with Ginger's situation now, but when you're dealing with mental illness as well, it's just a whole nother ball game when it comes to that. And you don't always get the same outcome as that you want. But I'm sure Ginger and Jane, both of y'all's heart in the end for your children would be that they had a healthy relationship with their biological mom. Even if that's something that never comes to pass, you would be open and willing for that. Would you agree?
I would agree with that. I think I've let my children be the guardrail for that. And I think we had spoke on this on another cast, is that they were highly irritated that my response was, well, I'm thankful for her. And that bothered them for a very long time. And the reason for my response in that was, I'm thankful that she brought me you, because without her, I wouldn't have you. And that goes for a lot of foster moms or adoptive parents. You can love your adopted child or foster child like your own child, but you need to be thankful and reciprocate to the ones that had carried them as well. So that was my response. And again, from the front side, maybe some days I didn't believe that, but long term, once they came to a reality with it, you have to be thankful for the individual that carried them and brought them into this earth. I just get the blessing to live the rest of their life with them. And what they choose to do with that relationship has always been open for them. And I've said that. But again, I don't control her actions, and she's created the situation that we're in. And I don't control my daughter's response to those as well. And so I've never hindered that. I've never hindered the relationship. I was actually the supervising visitor with them. So I was always with them, and that's what they found as safe, and they chose that. So even if we met with her in person, I was always with them to create that safety guardrail for them. And so for me, it really is dependent on how they view it. But again, it just goes back to that. You can forgive somebody, but you don't have to forget what they've done, but you can love them as an individual. You don't have to maintain. And I've told my daughters that if you choose to maintain a relationship, that's up to you. And I would never hinder them from that.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for bringing that in. And because all the dynamics are so different. And that is just, unfortunately, that is a lot of listeners, a situation that they are in where the other parent is just pretty much out of the picture. And so we want to touch base on all these different dynamics that are coming in with our co-parenting. What about when the other parent does not want to communicate? You're sending the messages, and they're just not responding. And Ginger, I know you have created a resource to make that a little bit easier. And sometimes they're court ordered, like it may be written in your papers, use this app so that you can communicate easier.
Sure.
And so do you see that with the app, that's what a lot of parents is it usually still one-sided, and there's the one person that is giving all the information, and then some people just choose to completely ignore it?
For sure. Very often there is, usually in any family, this is with a nuclear family or what we consider a new nuclear family, there's always an administrator, right? You have one person that's, Scarlett, you're running the calendar. Heidi, you're running the calendar, those types of things. You have that personality. 9 times out of 10, it's mom. And so you have an administrator, and then you can add 9 other members on there because you have other people that are caring for those children, whether it be grandparents, aunts, uncles, friends, sitters, whatever that is. And so you can add people on there that need to be part of that child's communication. Now, if I back up the bus, this didn't come to us right away. I like to say James and I are intelligent people, but again, while we went through an 8-year battle, we were going back to God saying, why are we doing this? Like, why can you not make this stop? And more from almost a resentful position. When we got custody of the girls and the Holy Spirit came and said, this is why we walked you through that valley, is so that you could come and do this. I completely understand. And if there are listeners out there that need to have a conversation, we can do that too. Working with a parent that doesn't want to participate, working with a parent that doesn't want to respond, working with a parent that isn't mentally capable to do that at the time, or not capable of walking through a court situation where they're given parameters and they're able to follow those. We've been in all of those situations. And again, in hindsight, it benefited us so that we can benefit other individuals with this. So when the idea was brought to us, we took the 4 pillars that were such a hindrance to us. And that was a shared calendar. It was very difficult for the individual on the other side to either get our children places, know what they were supposed to have with them, those types of things. So to have a shared calendar between the parents, a chat feature where you weren't having to use the child as the mediator for conversation. You can make a chat thread that has mom and dad and the child on it that says, Dad and I have switched days. I just want to let you know. And then you're not having to do what Heidi had to do, where, yes, I'd love to have this conversation, but we're going to put your dad in the mix because you're already in the mix. So you're making direct communication without directly communicating, so that there's no inflection. When you put a calendar event on and you tag your ex-spouse, they get an invite by a push notification. So they've been informed and invited, and the child feels accepted. So mom and dad have both been invited to the soccer game, but nobody's had to communicate about it. But everybody's on the same playing field then, and the child isn't the mediator. And then a geolocation check-in, not a tracker. We're HIPAA and COPA compliant, so we do not track anyone. You have to voluntarily check in. But with that opportunity gives that ability for both parents to chat, so that you can say, hey, I saw you checked in at Taco Bell. I know you're not with me, but who were you with? How was your day? How did your math test go? Whatever it is, it gives you an open opportunity to communicate with the child, to where you're not forcing long conversations on the other parent's time. It's just a quick chat. And that can be just a thread between you and the child. Or if mom and dad need to chat, but they can't do it directly, they can do that with each other without involving the child on their own thread. So those types of features, the shared color calendar, or shared color coded calendar for each child who has their own color, a geolocation check-in, so the child, your child's safe, even if they're on your time or not. If they check in at school or they check in anywhere else, both parents get informed. And then a shared document storage. So every year, the medical insurance card gets updated. That's an annual fight between co-parents. I don't have the insurance card. I don't have the birth certificate. I don't have the court document. And I think that probably all three of us have been in a situation where you've traded a day, you show up at school, but the teacher doesn't want to release the child to you because that is not your normal day. And you're going to have to prove to either the police or the dean or the principal or the teacher that you do have the document, and here's the information where the day was traded, or whatever you have to do. And again, we don't hope those situations on anybody, but we've all been through them. And I'm sure probably 60% of the viewers or listeners have been through that as well. But being able to have your court documentation in the palm of your hand, or a birth certificate, or the calendar so you can go back and reference it, or a chat thread to where the child's not being put in the middle. Those 4 pillars are what we built the platform on. And yes, unfortunately, it is court ordered some of the time, where the judge says you two should not speak. You're going to use this app. We like to train parents in advance, like probably at the stage where they're at with Marriage 365, is that you need to communicate better. And sometimes you need something in your toolbox to do that. And here's a tool that will help you guys prior to getting into a situation. We have a lot of mediators that use it with their families, mediators, or sometimes the court will assign you to an individual that will help you mediate through some issues, like a parenting coordinator. And so we work with a lot of those that will onboard their families, work with them until the training wheels can come off, and then the family can do it on their own. But again, when you're in a situation where it's so hostile in the beginning and you're not seeing kind of the, light at the end of the tunnel, tools like this are pretty important to the safety and longevity of the child, most importantly.
Yeah. And it mentions in the book too, like just keeping that record, whether you use the Family Core app or something. I like the app because it's all in one spot versus, I tried to communicate with him. I told him, but maybe it was verbally, or you sent him a text, but now it's been deleted, or you got a new phone or whatever. But if you have something that is keeping track of all of that for you, so that if you do end up having to go to court, you're not having to go and gather all of this documentation, and they can't say, well, they never inform me. They never keep me in the loop.
Yeah.
It's like, no, I try all right here. I've tried all of this, and there's no response there. And Heidi, you mentioned earlier, and so we're going to move into this next section, which is a huge co-parenting issue and just parenting, which is disciplining the child. So this one is tough because it also affects in your home. It's not just the stuff that's going on outside your house, but now you're having to come together with another person that does put you on defense. Like you can spank your kid or you can talk to him a certain way, but you definitely don't want somebody else to, and you become very protective on that. So will you share with us a little bit just from your experience and what it talked about in the book when it comes to disciplining your children?
Sure, absolutely. And this is an area where I think we could have definitely used this book before we blended so that I really knew how to do it. We figured it out on our own, which is exactly kind of what they suggest in the book. Is what we came up with is, because obviously the boys were mine, Kenny and I behind the scenes would come up with rules for the house that we both agreed on together. And then, so the boys didn't know, that but they saw us as a united front. But at the same time, mom would be the one to enforce the rule. So let's say one of the boys came home and they needed to have some discipline, I would be the one to discipline. But they knew Kenny was right there with me, giving the dad tone or the eyeball roll or whatever. And so he was my backup. So it was the biological parent. They did not take it out on the step parent, because then it wasn't like they were the evil one. Like, you were already my step parent. Why would you be trying to discipline? So that really worked well for us. And if I started to do something that Kenny didn't necessarily agree on, he would bite his tongue and then have to wait until we had some private time to talk about it and say, listen, this is not what I would do. And in the beginning of our relationship, that was really hard because I was parenting a lot of times out of guilt, from divorce and just my own childhood background, that I would not enforce some things, but would enforce other things. And it was very confusing, not just for my kids, but for my husband. He's like, wait a minute, I'm confused. What's the rule this week on this?
Right.
And so once
And
we
it happens
decided,
to be around the time you have your menstrual cycle that those are the things that irritate you.
exactly. So it was never consistent. But once Kenny said, and I'm going to tell you the honest truth, where this comes from is, if you're not in one of those 4 laws that we've talked about before, priority, pursuit, partnership. If you don't come to the marriage with the belief that God has now created you as one, that you now have to co-own and co-manage every aspect of your life, it will drive a wedge. And so I wanted my husband to be help in the disciplinary because my ex did not. I was the bad guy. And so I wanted that help, but I was not ready to give up control of my children in a partnership role to my new husband. And so that's where that wedge came from. So you have to be in partnership and in agreement of what the discipline looks like, the bedtime routine, homework, all of that stuff. You want to decide behind closed doors and then allow the biological parent to be the one who enforces that. Now, over time, as the relationship and the bond was created, and they knew that we were a united front, they began to love Kenny and respect him. They were okay with him being the disciplinarian. And as they got older, it got so much easier. So there wasn't a lot of discipline going on anyway. So that's just really what worked in our relationship.
Right. And it goes right in hand with, you cannot create rules without a relationship. Kids don't follow rules that are being barked at them without a relationship, because they're already in an uncomfortable situation, but then their perspective is like, well, who are you? Who are you? I don't know you. I don't respect you. We haven't built a relationship. So pushing those types of rules, or desire for a step parent to have to lay down the law when they don't have a relationship with them. Just because you married their mom or their dad doesn't mean you have a relationship with those children. You have to actively pursue and be intentional to have a relationship with them, so that the respect comes when there does need to be a sense of a rule put in place. And kids are like sharks, man. The second they see you weak, I don't care whether they're blended in whatever circumstance, when they see that mom or dad is weak in any area, they will unite like nobody's business and eat you alive. So I can't agree with you more. Make the rules behind closed doors.
Yep.
follow those rules. And then if each of you falter, say, hey, that's not what we agreed on, but do it behind closed doors. My husband will come home. He will literally come home. At one point, he's come home to 3 girls crying at once. And he's like, I don't know what happened here, but whatever mom said, that's what we're going to do. And then he gets behind the door and he's like, what are we going to do? Because why are they crying? So having that united front up front, but have it discussed prior is so important.
Yeah, this is one of those things that I'll say I don't have as many people reach out to me as when I go on to like blended family, step family forums, Facebook kind of stuff. And oh my gosh, it frustrates me because I know how it is. You're trying to run a household and you are the parent in that household. You should have the ability to make the rules and throw out the rules and tell them this is how it should be. That's ideal and that should take place. And it's so frustrating to so many step parents out there, specifically, I think more step moms that deal with this because they're taking on the mom role, that they feel like they have no authority in their household. They can't speak or say anything. But trust us, ladies, if it's you ladies that are listening, trust us. This is actually going to relieve some of your mental load if you're the one trying to do this for your stepchild, because like what Ginger and Heidi are both saying is that you want to form this relationship with that child first and let their biological parent take the lead when it comes to the discipline part. So you might recognize it because you've been home with them all day. Then dad comes home, and when y'all have y'all's chat later that night, be like, this is so frustrating. Or maybe they're teenagers. Nobody's helping wash the dishes, or no, they're coming in with their friends and they're destroying the kitchen or the house and then just leaving. And you should be able to say, hey, pick up your plate, please, or clean up after yourself. But if you just focus on when they come in and you have a good chat with them and you laugh and you joke, you're the good guy. Now at bedtime, you talk to your spouse and let them say, hey, we love that you bring your friends over, or hey, that you're making your own food, like that's awesome. You're maturing. But, could you help us out and pick up after yourself, and let them be the one to address it. And when you do that, it frees you from having to harp on them. And then it lets them and their parents have that time to have that harder conversation, which they already have the relationship established. And then it allows, as time goes on, like Heidi said, things get better. Just a perfect example of this, just yesterday, my stepdaughter moved back home. She brought a dog with her. The dog chewed up a pool noodle in the backyard, and it's tore up blue all over the backyard. Okay. And she's 24. So she's not a child. And she was like, I'll get it when I come home. It's too hot right now to go out there and clean up. So her dad comes home and he's like, this is a mess. And a storm was coming in. It's going to blow in the pool. And he's complaining. And I'm like, you're being too hard on her. Cause I've been conditioned to like, let things go. But then when he was like harping on her, I said, but she is giving the dog fresh fruit like to eat, and it was on the floor. Like, why is there a strawberry on the floor? Oh, he must not have ate it. And I don't want food on my floor. But instead of me saying, hey, let's not feed the dog fresh fruit, I'm like, but while you're talking to her about that, will you bring up not to feed her people food in the house,
Yeah.
And so once you establish this just dynamic between y'all, because I have a relationship with her, I could bring it up, but if I could have her dad do it and I could just take the fun,
good guy.
I get to be the good guy. Why not? So it does get easier the more you put it into practice, and it relieves that pressure off of you. And so before we wrap up, because I do want to just hit on this when it comes to, and we didn't even get into like parenting at the other person's household, but I wanted to just jump on over to child support, because this is another big topic when it comes to co-parenting. And in my household, I'll just say I don't know anything about this because we never received it. We had our kids full time. our exes were supposed to pay. They never did. And we just chose that God would take care of us and provide with what we needed. And I did use it as a tool, though, when my kids went to go live with their dad. I tried to use it as a way to force his dad not to force their dad not to push me on that topic, because I was like, you haven't paid child support ever, and this is how much you owe. So if you try to take me to court on this, then I will bring this up. And so it ended up being a whole child support battle instead of actually trying to get the kids from leaving our household, because I didn't want them to leave as teenagers. But what is y'all's thoughts, advice? What works? Was child support even a thing in y'all's households either?
Heidi, you want to go first?
Yeah, yay. So, oh man, it sucks because I think sometimes the spouse who has to pay the child support uses that as some sort of leverage, and they hold it as a carrot over the other parent and as control. And sometimes in our situation, we would see delayed payment for a few days, never really anything bad. So if I could go back and do it over, I would make sure that there was direct deposit and never having to ask, because I felt like I had to ask, hey, where's my check for the month? And I felt like that was control. He always paid, never did not pay, was always good about that. But I think there was a little bit of control issue there. And it, sometimes it would come up in conversation like, what are you using the child support for? Well, I'm using it to help raise your children. How I spend it at the house is whatever financial, needs I have there. So if there's a way to talk to the ex about the expectations of what child support is going for, obviously they have their own perception. If we go on vacation, oh, so you used my money to go on vacation this month. Well, no, there's bills that have to be paid, and, it all goes into the same fund. So there's so much emotion around money for anybody anyway. And then if there's an ex involved with it, it can just get super messy. So I think the most automated you can make the money or switching of funds, the better it is for everybody. It takes the emotion out of it. Keep records upon records upon records. If you're doing things like we did, is I got a check, and then we would split school supplies, medical bills, all of those kind of things. So we had to constantly be taking pictures of, receipts and splitting and writing extra checks or all this kind of stuff. So maybe Ginger, I don't know if this is something that your app does really good at. It might be something that an app could help cut down on a lot of that frustration.
Sure. Well, secure document storage would be a key resource, and then putting it in the chat and let them know that it's there. Once you snap a picture of the receipt as a secure document and label it and tag the other parent on it, they'll get notification that they got it and they know exactly what it is. Then you've sent it over. I'm going to have to agree with you on the sense of as automated as you can make it, as far as like a withdrawal from their initial paycheck, and then it's coming to you and nothing has to be said or done about it. What I would stress though, money and communication are the number one reasons for divorce beyond something catastrophic. So having a communication about money with your ex that is involving the children that aren't under your roof is probably exponentially harder than it would be if you guys were just under the same roof. That being said, we've done it all different ways. So what I would say is I would agree with Heidi in keeping it as automated as possible. Let the court mediate what that is by, I know in most states it's mediated by what your current wage is and what percentage it takes to raise that child. And again, do it completely through automation through the court system so that you're not having to ask for it. The worst thing a child can hear is that you only have me because of the money, or you don't want me because of the money. And so it should never be a discussion in front of the child. It should never be a topic of conversation when the child is around. And it surely shouldn't be a reason why you should or shouldn't see your child. If you're a healthy parent and you're going to contribute something good to their life, most states don't even view it as if you don't pay child support, you can't see your child. That's not a component that goes into custody. Child support is
No.
its issue, and the child should never be involved in that conversation. And so again, if you need to use an app and snap a picture and send it over, so it doesn't need to be a topic of conversation, but you do need to have the documentation, I would do that. But it's always best that you have a pre-arranged agreement on the costs that you're going to split and how you're going to split them. Put a time limit on, you need to have this paid. If you get a receipt, it needs to be paid within 30 days and have documentation of that. And then anything you can do automated through the court system through a direct deposit or a direct pull from the individual check when the court decides that you do that. It should never be something that should be exchanged or spoken about with the child involved.
Well, I'm glad that both of y'all had some input on that, since I really don't. I mean, I'm sitting here like, there's so many different things that frustrate people. I mean, some people are frustrated because they have to pay child support, and they do, like Heidi said, feel like they're paying for other people to live lavishly or not work. They get to sit at home because they're having to pay so much of their paycheck is going to child support. And I understand it's painful to see that much, especially when you get newly married and you're already struggling financially, and that chunk is going over here to help keep the lights on another house. And that's the thing, is the money is not to go do fun things with your kids or to put in a savings account. Some people might be blessed to do that. That money is to put food on the table, and that money keeps the electricity on and a house for them to live in. It's really just absorbed into your living expenses, because if you were still married, you would be contributing to some of that. And unfortunately, you're having to do that for your own home now as well. So you're paying for two different things. But I don't even think child support really covers much of what it costs to raise children in general. So that's one thing. But then also not getting the kids involved in that money talk. And I don't think, even with us not getting paid, I don't think our kids, unless I blocked it all out, I don't think we ever really had those conversations with the kids, and that they knew that their parents didn't pay child support. It just wasn't something that we talked about with them. But I do know, like, I had friends that would be so upset because their ex-spouse wouldn't pay half of the $25 doctor visit. And I'm like, that would be a bless. I mean, anything, right? Because if you're getting nothing, and I had the attorney general tell me, you can't squeeze blood from a radish or a turnip or something like that. Blood, is that the saying? Can't squeeze blood from a turnip. And I sat there as a young single mom, just like, are you kidding me? Like, this is what y'all's job is. My kids are out of the system, and I got a paper like maybe 6 months ago that says, hey, just checking in. My youngest is 20, just checking in on y'all status. Guys, where have y'all been? Like, what in the world? Like, are you even thinking? But then even for Randall, God placed it on his heart when Riley was preteen to just stop it from adding up, just to let it go. I have her for the majority of the time. I take care of her. I don't need her money to come over here and help contribute to my household. And I don't want to hold this over her head anymore. So he just said, we're done calculating this, like, and everything that you owe me past is squashed. For me personally, I keep it as a running joke. Even the kids now, because they're grown, maybe we shouldn't do this, but they use their dad's like Netflix, or they did until Netflix put a stop on the sharing of the plan. And they're like, oh, I just see that as child support from back child support. Because they do know now that they're older, and we've had discussions, especially when they were leaving, and I, vomited everything trying to like just scare tactic to keep them here. And so now we do joke about it, but it's going to look different in each of your different families. And I love both of y'all's advice of making it as automated as it can be. Because like in my situation, my ex-husband worked under the table, and so he never got an actual paycheck. So income tax couldn't take it from him. Nobody could take the money and give it to me that he made. And I'm sorry if that's your situation. I'm sorry that you are owed back child support and that you're struggling and you're not getting anything, because I know it hurts, especially if you and your current spouse are struggling to make ends meet. And it would be so helpful to have that other parent contribute in that way. And I'm sorry that that is your situation. And I might laugh and make light of it now, but I would have dreams that, ooh, if one day he got a job and they just took that money, we would be set. Like we would be doing good. But God has taken care of us every step of the way. God has been so faithful in providing for our children and their needs. And to let that go so that it's not creating the bitterness inside of you and holding on to that to the ex, is to be able to just do what you can. If you go to court and put some things into motion and you're able to get it automated and you're getting that money and you're using it to support your kids, like being grateful and thankful for what you have. And if you have not been able to see any kind of support when it comes from that ex-spouse, just to be able to trust that God is going to take care of your needs and you don't need that provision from them. Was there anything else? But if you're listening to this and you haven't been paying your child support, pay your child support, okay? It talks about that in the book. Like if you're a believer, do what God is calling you to do. And if the court has ordered you to share and pay this part, do that. Do that. So anything else y'all want to add before we wrap this up, ladies?
No, I think we can wrap it up, but it leads us right into chapter 8 when we get there, is facing new family challenges together in your new nuclear family or blended family or however you see it. But I think this was a fun chapter and I'm looking forward to the next.
Awesome. Same for you, Heidi?
No, I mean, I think it's a touchy subject and it can be very painful. Just not the discipline, but the financial aspects of it. And so we just need to have grace for ourselves where we're at in the relationship with our new spouse, our ex-spouse, and just know that if you're putting God first in your life, and he wants to bless you, and he will bless you as long as you are, putting him first and just trying your hardest to live like he wants you to live.
Yeah. Good. Way to wrap it up right there. That was perfect. So yes, guys, if you haven't got the book, get the book and read all the details in here. But thank you, ladies, for sharing y'all's hearts and your perspective with our BFAM community. And again, BFAM, if y'all have any questions or specific things, if you are like, we want to know more about this app or getting some just counseling as far as what Heidi and her husband do, when you're hearing this, just reach out to us. We want to hear from you. Send us a DM. We're on Instagram, Marriage in Motion 365 with Heidi, and then the Family Core with Ginger. Send us a DM and reach out and let us know. And we are more than willing just to kind of go back and forth and see if there's anything that we can do. And there are resources out there. You're not doing this alone. So I think that's the biggest thing to walk away from this co-parenting, is you might feel like you're doing it alone, but you're not. We're here for you. So reach out to us. And until next time, remember to enjoy your blended family. Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.
Thanks for joining us today. We hope this episode has been a blessing and encouraged your family journey.
Make sure you stay connected with us and join our weekly Blended Family newsletter. We send an email out every Friday morning full of support and encouragement.
And when you join, we also want to give you a free gift. So go get yours today. The link is in the show notes below.
Have an amazing day. Remember to enjoy the journey with your blended family, and we'll see you on the next episode.